think in a very meaningful sense, America and Iran have been fighting a low-grade war over 30 years, since the 1979 revolution. And the Stuxnet virus or Cafe Milano plot are just the latest salvos in this ongoing conflict. For over 30 years, the two nations have been suspended between peace and war, between the light and the darkness, and the twilight, hence the title of my book. And relations have ping-ponged back and forth between prospects of a hopeful dialogue for peace and the smell of cordite and the talk of war. And today, a deep distrust permeates the relationship, one that has hardened resolve on both sides. But the current nuclear standoff is I think, a symptom and not the cause of this animosity. There has to be a bold opening to re-engage diplomatically with Iran. I don't think talking to Iran should be seen as a reward for good behavior, as it was particularly during George W. Bush's administration, but rather a necessity for American security. And continuing to pass notes back and forth through a Swiss or some intermediary is a recipe, I think, for disaster in a breaking crisis. And bilateral interactions between the U.S. and Iran may not bring about a quick rapprochement, but at least they will help provide both sides clues to the other's red lines and insight in each other's country that frankly lacks now. But most importantly, I think the U.S. needs to accept that this is a long-term conflict akin to the Cold War, and our strategy needs to be bipartisan and dedicated not to the nuclear issue that everybody fixates on, but addressing the overarching, managing the overarching challenge of Iran, at least from America's interest, and that a credible deterrent combined with active and hopefully continuous dialogue may not eliminate the crisis, but at least might manage it.
Do you see parallels with our foreign policy with Egypt and our foreign policy with Iran? How have we failed with both?
That's a great question, and it was one that was asked to me by a senior military officer not at the height of the issue with Mubarak. It was a challenge in both cases. In fact, the parallels between the Shah and Mubarak, I think, are quite striking. In both cases, you have a long-term U.S. ally. In both cases, he's old, sick, probably at the end of his line. But the opposition to him seems almost, worse in a sense. In the case of the Shah, we could have gone the Brzezinski route, but fundamentally, I think the opposition to him was too strong, and he was going to die in a few years anyway, and nobody was under any illusions that his son had the capability to run the country. So in that case, probably the answer would have been to cut our losses as early as possible, which is what Ambassador Sullivan recommended, and support the opposition group, at least. And there were a number of substantial liberals within the opposition group at the time. You end up in the same situation with Mubarak. At some point, I think the administration made the right decision. At some point, sentimentality has to end, and you have to start positioning yourself for the future.